Welcome back to Downloadable Content, the Final Fantasy XIV ad campaign, as the player tries to convince me to join them in their madness. And right now, it seems to be working. I'm getting more interested the more and more I hear about it. So, we ended the first half with me cutting Ronny off as he was about to talk about the crafting. So I'm going to let him start with that because, again.
Okay, well, I mean, as we all know, I was talking about the crafting during the entire break, so I've said everything I wanted to say.
All right, fine, let's move on.
I'm kidding. I mean, I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I mean, I do have several capped crafting gathering classes, but I will just say, I feel like crafting and gathering in this game is so solid and so much better than you see in most other MMOs. Anybody else here have much experience in the crafting?
Well, I won't say that everything's 80 because I didn't level up Fisher, but everything else is. So
easy to level Fisher right now.
But what I'm hearing is that you have beginning numbers in Fisher, and you need to jack those numbers up.
I mean, I know that's the hardest class, is to be a fisherman. So I've just been really intimidated by it. It's been really hard for me to try and get into it.
That makes a lot of sense.
There's a whole boat to do. You can do this via the boat. There's a boat.
There's so many different baits, and you have to go to the water, and there's oceans and streams. And I'm not a strong swimmer.
See, I have 80. I have only 80 Weaver for crafting, but I have 80 minor botanist and fisher for gathering.
Weaver's what I picked as well. Yeah, I mean, the really impressive thing is it's almost as complicated as a battle class. There are like loads of abilities you learn that you have to do to make specific recipes. It's not just click the materials you've gathered and you get the item like in other unnamed video games.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. There's so much complexity in it where you have to finish the item, and you have a bar that you have to fill to finish the item. You have a bar that will high quality the item, but then you have all of these abilities that you use to get there that use up an equivalent amount of its MP. And it's just you could literally just play this game to do the crafting and gathering.
And there are plenty of people that do, because we won't even get into housing, but there's so much to do beyond the fights in this game.
Yeah, there are games within the game. And this is one of them. So, and I do like, we mentioned Diadem earlier, which was basically a failure as a pseudo instance, not quite dungeon, not quite not. But then they recently repackaged it basically as dungeons but for gatherers, and that seems to have gone quite well.
You get a super bazooka.
Yeah.
I don't know any other way to put it than that.
So they're really good at taking criticisms and taking stuff and actually fixing the stuff or repurposing it in a way that is useful. It's why I'm excited for whatever they're going to do with Eureka, because they have a pretty good track record of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're just not afraid to try things and see if they fail or not, while being consistent with the content people like.
I'm still waiting for my eggies, though.
A question.
They got 3 or 4 of them in the game right now. Why can't they just patch them in for us? Sorry, that's a personal summoner complaint.
Question
Lower
for
reasons.
you guys. So you mentioned in the first half about the story, about how it's a linear story. So what is I guess the mix of linear / open worldedness of this game?
Okay.
Are we talking like Elder Scrolls level of open world, or does it is it follow a more sort of linear older Final Fantasy type?
Okay. Well, here, I'll give the brief little breakdown, then everybody else can add in. You have 3 main different types of quests. You have the main scenario, These have cutscenes. They have they have major plot. They are a continuous linear narrative. Then you have class quests, which are similar. They don't typically have cutscenes, but they do have their own self-contained plots that follow you on your journey through learning your class and becoming a great hero. And then you have the third bucket, which are the individual quests within the world. Many of them will have their own plots within them. Doing certain ones will unlock other ones, but they're more self-contained, and those are what you find in the open world. So you have two types of quests that are basically kind of railroads that just follow this linear narrative, and then you have the normal quests you can just kind of pick up anywhere.
And I guess to describe the world, when you create your character for the first time, you pick one of 3 major cities to start in. And then, although the story tries to guide you in certain directions, after a point, outside of you could get into a very high level area and kill yourself, the areas from the base game, at least, are all available to you at once. You can just go exploring and see how far you can get and what new areas you can discover. Where it becomes a bit more linear is the expansion areas open up as you get to certain milestones in the story. And then those additional areas unlock, and then you can explore those.
So, like, to give an example, Ishgard is one of the major city-states in from the original game, and they have their gates closed and they've locked themselves off of the world because they're currently at war with a clan of dragons. And the first expansion, you prove yourself to them, and they end up taking you in, and you help them in that war. So until you do that, until you do the piece of the story that ingratiates yourself to them, you can't enter any of their area.
Okay.
And to touch on the unlocking areas as you go, they also have the flight system from the first expansion on, where I think most people play games where you can fly around in the open world. And what they do is they kind of guide you through the area, and you unlock the components for flight through the quests and through traveling through the area until eventually, when you're done with the area, boom, now you have flight, now you can go anywhere.
Yeah, it's sort of allows you to, it forces you to like explore and understand the area before you're allowed to just jaunt over it from above, because otherwise you just not look at all the detail and the villages and stuff that are going on.
So before Sid gives you the airship, you have to do do some work.
But before Sid gives you the airship, you have to go and get his memories back because he doesn't remember anything.
Yeah, it's actually really, really interesting from the perspective of, say, a new player. When you the first time, because I remember the first time, coming from WoW, I was like trying to get flight. And I thought that it worked a certain way, and my FC, which is the name of the guild's free company, is what they're called. But my FC members were like, "Yeah, it doesn't work like that. You have to go around and do all this stuff." And at first, it was really intimidating because it was like, "Oh, I've got to do all this extra stuff. I just want to like walk up to a vendor, pay them to fly, and then fly." And it's like, nope, that's not how it works. You actually have to explore. You have to find these things that are hidden. I mean, they're hidden. You have to find them. They give you a couple of ways to find them to try to narrow down the search and make it kind of easy, but you're putting in the work, so flying does feel like a reward.
Yeah, I guess to describe the other major content that we've kind of skipped around is the battle system itself.
We also haven't talked about the beast tribes.
No, yeah. So I guess the best way to describe it would be outside of the open world content where there are monsters wandering around and you can kill them. There are several types of instanced battle content where you party up with other players, even if you're trying to enjoy your single player story experience. So you have 4-player dungeons where you run through some kind of environment, be it a lot of caves to begin with to much cooler places later on. You have bosses, which are normally 8 players, all collectively opposing this one boss. Then you have 24-player content, which are these massive raid areas where this ridiculous group of people will go, and there are components in that content where like groups have to split up and do different tasks.
And let's be honest here. Out of those 24 people, probably a third of them are naked or in beach clothing. Another third of them are furries dressed up as Moogles or other creatures. And then a third of them look like they are Final Fantasy protagonists from the later games, where they all look so cool that they are way too cool and unrealistic, and nobody looks like that.
Yeah. And then above that content, I guess, is all of that content is kind of normal casual content. Like some of it will be difficult for new players, definitely, but it's all at like the base level, and then above that you have very challenging content designed for the people who all the stuff I described is for the people who just want to go through the story and enjoy it. Then you have really challenging content for people who just want to like get the shiniest weapon, the biggest mount.
Yeah, no, unlike World of Warcraft, no story is locked behind extremely difficult content. You don't have to have done all the hardest content to be able to finally go into and beat the final guy at the end of Sunwell Plateau. Or like, no matter what, there's always an easier form of all of this. There's the normal form of the content will get you through all the story. And if you want to do a harder version just to get better items, it is there for you if that's the kind of content you like. And one thing I wanted to say I really appreciate about this is the 24-man content is the easier raid content, and the 8-man raid content is the harder raid content, which is the way it should be, because part of the difficulty of 24-man content is organizing the people in it. So by making the 24-man the harder one, you're kind of just getting rid of the whole point of it.
Yeah, I've been in some
or you could
of
just
the
Leroy
newer
Jenkins the entire thing.
like some of the when new 24-mans come out, and like especially later in the expansions like Auburn Monastery, some of the
Love it.
let's call them weaker players in the community
Wow.
really struggle with it, and you immediately appreciate that the hard content in this game doesn't require that many people.
I will say, circumstances being what they are right now, there's actually a lot of new players and returning players that are going through a lot of this stuff for the first time. And I kind of have more fun when people don't have it mastered and you just steamroll through it.
You can call me out by name.
Yeah, it's so it's like, now we're going to separate the chaff.
Well, like, the funny thing is that insofar as the, like, okay, you know, in WoW, there's a very distinct haves and have-nots system in terms of knowledge of dungeons and things like that. So if you were to go in with, say, a tank, that tank is going to want to go fast, because that tank knows the content. And so he just wants to blitz through it to get whatever the reward is at the end. And that happens a little in 14, but what you can also get is there's this thing that's on your character, we call it like a leaf or a sprout, that says, hey, this person is a new player, like, don't be a jerk to them. And usually when people who've been playing for a while see the sprout, they're actually like reasonable and like help and actually give advice rather than just being like, nope, we're going full speed.
Yeah, I mean, you'll always have jerks in your community, but on the whole, I would say 14 has a surprisingly nice community.
It is the friendliest MMO community I've been part of, and part of that is the developers. Even though I don't entirely agree with some of their decisions, but like the entire reason we don't have a DPS meter built into the game is because they don't want people using it as a way to discriminate against other players.
Yeah. And they've even, as you say, you can disagree in exactly how the developers do this kind of stuff, but in some cases they've even like taken very prime public example, like executions of people, of being like, this streamer was publicly shaming other players for playing quote bad and banning them for a while, being like, this is unacceptable behavior in our community. And those are very well-known, highly watched streamers.
And like one of the, to me, all right. So we're gonna get into that prime numbers boost in SJW content real quick. One of the things about Final Fantasy for me that I like, as you know, a black gamer dealing with a lot of, you know, the MMO community, is that real talk, like, this is, not only are they a kind community, but there's a lot of like marginalized representation within the community. And so you have a lot of LGBTQ people, you have a lot of like black and brown and people of color people, you have, you know, and they're sprinkled through the community, and it doesn't feel weird.
Absolutely. I mean, the LGBT representation, I mean, the fact that you can marry other players and it doesn't matter what your gender is.
Yeah, I mean, and other examples, and they've had not great histories in the past, but they're improving this very rapidly. Like, you can put a dress on a man, it's fine. Like, do what the fuck you want.
I do have to say that the Yora dress on certain types of Rogadin is like, like, I'm happy to see it, but big ooh.
So I don't know which data centers y'all are on, but I do share a data center with Balmung, so I'm used to seeing a lot of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, Balmung.
Oh wait, yeah. So this is also important. The amount of like shipping and fanfiction communities are insanely big within the Final Fantasy space. So if you're the type of person who likes to roleplay, not only are there a lot of roleplay servers that aren't just like Goldshire ++, but like they are, I want to say, full of people who actually want to roleplay, who want to like engage on that sort of level with the content while doing the raids, while doing all the story. But yeah, you're also getting really, really cool stories from these people. And then, you know, you got people with like fan fiction online and all sorts of stuff. Like, it's nuts. And these are like active, viable members of the community who keep the game running.
And the developers help with that, because that's even an option. You see it in the Party Finder, where people will put up advertisements. Oh, we're going to do the role-playing cafe this time, this date. People can schedule events where they can all get together and do this, and I think that's really cool.
That is amazing, because that has always been a concern for me. That has been a reason largely for me why I was turned off MMOs, because of just how MMOs in general, not Final Fantasy XIV, sort of acquired this reputation, just that its players were nasty, hateful, just assholes, and I'm just like, I want no part of it. So hearing that the community here in this game is definitely, by and large, not, the scum of villainy, the den of villainy, that MMO is sort of taking on this reputation. That's very good to hear.
Well, Balmung is, but
Yeah, I'm gonna kick the hornet's nest here and say yes. Well, not for anybody in this room, I don't think, but definitely some people might be listening, or at least some people in the community. The reason I believe the community is this friendly, which, yes, part of it comes to what the developers have done and the rest of that, but I think part of it is something we touched on earlier. Final Fantasy XIV, rightly or wrongly, has a reputation for being a shit game for PvP. And a shitload of the toxic players in the MMO community are PvP players that are hyper.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that are hyper competitive, and they are very toxic. And the fact that they don't have that style of gameplay in this that attracts them means that we don't get a lot of those players.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've casually mentioned PvP, but I think one thing to point out is there is no PvP in the open world. It's a separate instance thing. You can't walk around and get murdered by another player.
Yeah, there is no ganking in this game. If you want to do PvP, you go to the person, you queue up for a PvP match, and you go in and you know what you're getting into.
Good.
And I remember quite clearly playing on a PvP server in World of Warcraft and having people 40 levels above me waiting in the starting areas, or in the first area they can wait for you, to kill people 50 levels below them just because it's fun to kill the newbies.
Yeah, I don't see the point in that. I'm sure they get fun out of it, but it's a shit experience for everyone else.
Yeah, their fun is in ruining the fun of other people, and that is not something they can do in 14. That is something 14 inherently prevents them from doing.
That's why I think a lot of that comes from Yoshi P's experience having been a WoW player, is that I will guarantee he's experienced that.
So
and I will guarantee that he's like sick of that bull.
Yeah, as are we all. The only reason I was on a PvP server in World of Warcraft was because I had two friends of mine that wanted to play with me that would not play on anything but a PvP server. And it's yes, I was about to say, and I think we should probably go on to the expansion stuff, so Joshy can say some stuff before he leaves about them.
I'm afraid I'm just going to say I'm going to have to drop off now, but thank you for having me, and you guys have a good time.
Later.
Yes, thanks
Later.
so much, Joshy. Hopefully it won't be 3 more years again before I talk to you.
No, I'll be back for the 7 remake.
Yes, you will. All right. Thanks so much. You have a good night.
Bye-bye.
And then there were 5.
Right.
But yes, I'm actually very glad to know that the community as a whole, that is kind of important. It's been a turnoff for me. That's why I typically don't get into MMOs. So knowing that is definitely another point in its favor. But yes,
it's as I say, the game really is basically like a single player game with other players in the way it's built.
Even there's some nods to it in the plot. They'll say, "Oh, it's really great of those friends of yours to come help." Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Friends being the other players.
The best line being, that with a thing going on in the people in story, because you have to go into a dungeon, goes, go and see if there's some friends of yours, and they go, and one of the characters goes like something to the effect of, "We're on a deserted island. What do you think, that he's just gonna have several like friends out on a fishing boat that can come and battle for us?" And you're like, as a matter of fact, get my fishing friends in here.
I would definitely say that it's actually super duper funny, because that is the one place in the story that irritates the actual hell out of me, which is the fact that, like, I want to be a member of a group of Warriors of Light, but the story insists that there's only one, and it drives me nuts. And the only time they even kind of vaguely hint that there's more is a major spoiler.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, there are other adventurers that help you, but you are the only Warrior of Light, because they do reference the other adventurers with you for several. There's actually a list of which dungeons you in story did yourself and which dungeons in story you did with other people, depending on what they mention before you go in.
That's an interesting concept. Oh, it looks like Joshy came back.
To say that's Ron.
I was gonna say, listen, I don't know what you're talking about, but I cannot do an impression of a dashing Englishman's voice.
There was a running gag earlier, Ron. And welcome, by the way. Good morning. That Joshy just got off. He was only on for the last couple of hours, and he said, we should make it so that when Ron comes on, just keep referring to him as Joshy.
Oh, fair. That's fine.
So that's why I said, "Oh, Joshy's back." But yes, the group has been doing a very good job, Ron, of trying to convince me to buy this game. So
very, very brief. Can I give my history with it before we continue on with wherever we were?
Okay, you've got 12 seconds. No, yes, go ahead.
I had tried the closed beta of 1.0 on my laptop in 2011 or 2012 or whatever it was.
Ooh.
And, first off, my laptop could not run it, which was... I was expecting that, but I wanted to get an idea of A, what it looked like, and B, if this was a thing worth, buying when I eventually moved over to a dedicated workstation PC. Spoilers, it wasn't. Most assuredly wasn't. And I had seen all the bad press and all the news about it, and even in the little bit of time I was available to mess around with it and play with it, it was a thing of there is something seriously wrong with this game, and they definitely need to work on it, and I don't know if they can work on it while it was up and active. But eventually they did the whole A Realm Reborn 2.0, and then I joined for 2.0 release and enjoyed my time with that much more.
That has sort of been the general consensus here, is that when it was re-released, people joined in. Everyone was showering Square Enix with praise, and
I will just give my opinions on what happened as a whole a little bit later, but there's definitely some blame that could be levied, and there is some deserved praise, but it's one of those things where you need to be able to see both sides of the good and the bad. You need to point out the faults so that you can praise when they do it right.
So, just before you came on, we were talking. We were just finishing up talking about the Final Fantasy XIV community, and how one of my biggest concerns about any MMO is that the online community is just a bunch of horrible, evil people, when that MMOs have sort of acquired a reputation for that, whereas this game is decidedly not.
Yeah, I would say the 14 community as a whole is probably one of the more... I don't know if welcoming is the most... the most right word, but it is one of the more forgiving ones, where part of that's due to the kind of the culture and the history of the game, where they try and encourage some helping out newer players with the duty system and the fate systems and stuff like that, where you're encouraged to help out the newer players with mechanical bonuses, but it's also just a general sense of a community trying to enjoy this game as a whole after the history it has gone through, from the issues of 1.0 to the revival from 2.0 and onward. And they try and... the community in general tries to preserve that mentality in most situations. As long as you're not doing any sort of serious hardcore in-game raiding, then you will probably find a very easygoing. I don't want to say easygoing, but a very understanding community as a whole.
Even when you get into the rating stuff, I would argue, yes, the rating is going to be a lot more than otherwise, but I would still say the rating community is friendlier than the equivalent community in a game like WoW.
Very much so, in my experience.
So, with the remaining time that we've got in this second half, since we've been dancing all over the place about them, the different expansions that have come with Final Fantasy XIV that have come out. We've had 3 of them. We've had, obviously, you had A Realm Reborn, and then you had the 3 following it that have come out once every 2 years. Nice little.
One thing I'll say about the one before we go into the specific ones, but about the expansions is I really appreciate that when an expansion comes out, if you buy it, you get all the previous ones at no cost. I appreciate that from them.
Nice.
Because they could be nickel and diming you and making you buy them each at $20 a pop, like WoW did for a while.
That would explain why when I was looking at this game on Steam, I only saw the Shadowbringers expansion. I didn't see a purchase for Heaven's Sword. Sword and Stormblood. I didn't know that. So
what happens is when a new expansion comes out, any prior expansion and content gets wrapped up in the base game bundle. So that way, even if you cannot or have no desire to play the newest content when it comes out, and for some reason, you can still play anything leading up to that new content.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, but I think you worded that incorrectly. All the expansions get bundled together. The base game still is just A Realm Reborn, and then all the expansions go together with what the new expansion is.
Nope.
No?
The way it's set up now is, I think. Hold on, let me open. But
did it used to be that way? Because I swear that's how it worked.
I think that's how it used to be. I think they changed it so that now.
That makes. The new way makes more sense.
The base game as of right now is up to Stormblood.
Okay.
And then you have to, I think, buy Shadowbringers.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Discount.
Yeah, I believe this changed with the release of Shadowbringers, where they said, listen, we know we're starting to get to a point where we have multiple expansions across, and we don't want to have people buying multiple things and not knowing what's going to happen. So what we're going to do is, any expansion that's not the newest one, all gets wrapped up into the A Realm Reborn.
Yeah.
So that to make it easier for purchases on, various platforms.
Yeah. Well, it makes more sense. Depreciated expansions become part of the base game, rather than the way it was before, where depreciated expansions get brought in with the new expansion. So, if you brought, let's say, Stormblood and Heaven's Sword would be the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It makes more sense to make it part of the base game. So that's a good change. I did not realize they did that.
So as of right now on Steam, we're someone to be prepared to gift you this game, right?
Yep.
It would cost $19.99 for all the way up to Stormblood. $19.99 all the way to Stormblood. And then another $40 for Shadowbringers.
So total, it's a $60 game for everything.
And counting, almost 2,000 hours of enjoyment, at least from me.
I'll say for you. I don't think it'll take any reasonable person 2,000 hours if they're just going through the story.
Well, no, but yeah, someone who's actively playing it and actively engaging with it, but not letting it completely dominate my life. And I've burned almost 2,000 hours in this freaking game. So that should tell you something.
That's a good question. How long do you guys think each of the expansions would take just doing the story?
A Realm Reborn, are you including that or just the expansions?
Okay. So
I just mean each individually.
Brief addendum here. Right now, Brian and two listeners at home, they are doing a very massive reworking of the story
Yes,
the
we
main story
talked about
quest
that in the
of.
first half.
Okay, they're okay.
Yeah,
So-
I've been advised to wait until the summer update.
Yes. Once that goes through, I would say if you are playing through the story of each expansion, assuming they keep A Realm Reborn story at a similar length and pace of the future expansions, probably 30 hours of casual playing per expansion. So that's what, 120 hours
Which
Yeah.
is still
roughly
very
right
good.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, depending on the expansion, probably between 25 and 40 hours. So 30 is a good middle ground.
Yeah. Depending on how much other content you engage with.
I
How
think
long
I
you get
think
stuck in the gold saucer.
I think the longest, at least in my eyes, outside of A Realm Reborn, which is getting redone, and we'll see how much that ends up, would be Heaven's Sword, which is the one I would think would be closer to 40.
Yeah, Heaven's Ward is probably the next longest, but I think they realized even during Heaven's Ward that having these longer stories isn't as enjoyable because they can do a lot more exposition just with small tidbits of dialogue said by NPCs or with optional quests outside they're not tied to the main story quest.
I would say Stormblood is probably the shortest at probably 25 hours. And then I think Shadowbringers brings it in about 30 to 35, where it's a little longer than Stormblood, but not as long as Heaven's Sword.
Yeah. I'd say that's a fair breakdown. Now,
And we'll see what A
again,
Realm
this-
Reborn is going to be, because they're just throwing it up in the air at this point, because none of us know what we have ideas, but none of us knows what it's going to end up being until the update drops.
Yeah, I would definitely say that if you went breakneck, literally nothing but story mode, about 120 to maybe 140 hours would be just from first opening screen to the to be continued,
To the credits.
Yeah.
well, to the to be continued that's currently for
I know, but I appreciate that each expansion has a credits.
True.
Yes. Each expansion will have a credits that will roll when the quote unquote main content of that expansion has occurred. So for Brian, this will be when the 3.0 content finishes up in Heaven's Ward, the 4.0 content finishes up in Stormblood, and the 5.0 content 5.0 expansion of Shadowbringers will have credits roll at the end of the main story quest as that game released when that expansion occurred.
Or the 2.0 content in A Realm Reborn, because A Realm Reborn had credits as well.
Okay, I cannot remember. It's been a while since I played A Realm Reborn base story.
Yeah,
but I
it
assume
did.
there was.
It did after the stuff in Ulda, and that's all I'll say.
Okay.
So the first expansion, which came out,
Heaven's
Ward, came out 2015, 2 years after Realm Reborn. So,
and it introduced ice. It was the Icebringer expansion for this Monster Hunter World.
Yeah. It's a bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, I know.
Was that a giggle or a whimper, Shan?
Why not both?
Yes.
It is, as we mentioned earlier. It was the example we used earlier, Ron, when we were talking about how areas unlock throughout the expansions. This is what unlocked Ishgard for us, the fourth of the city-states, which used to be a beautiful place before the moon fell, and now is mostly an ice-locked hellhole.
Yes.
In a 1,000-year war with one of the first dragons.
I was going to say, keep in mind that they went from a used to be idyllic paradise to post-apocalyptic cold hell. And also, by the way, we're fighting dragons for the past 1,000 years.
Yeah, you can see places where literally, like, creatures and plants, like spring ones, are just frosted over and frozen in ice. because it all happened in a split second when the moon fell.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you drop a moon on a planet.
Yeah.
Just ask Termina.
I mean, to be fair, this is even worse because it was a moon that then exploded into a dragon that nuked a whole bunch of stuff too.
I mean,
Oh, Bahamut.
I mean that'll really make for a bad day.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I think I would ask in this particular, since we do want to get through the expansion, what would you say was your favorite memory from Heavensward? Like, what was in, if you can avoid spoilers, but if you can't, like, fuck it, go ham, I guess. What would you say would be your favorite moment? Like that moment that just made you go, oof.
I can start on this one. So it's not 5.0. I forget which of it's like 0.1 or 0.2 or whatever, but it's you're on the bridge and everything's coming to a head, and I think most people will know what I'm talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just like that 2-minute lead-in scene where you see everything that's happening before your character flies in. That was a hell of a moment.
I suppose my favorite, and it's really easy. I'm going to be as general as I can because, climax and all, but it's you and Alphino and Estinian. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a good cutscene. It's such a good moment. And the whole expansion builds to it. And just, it hits me in the feels every time.
I'm not going to say I ugly cried, but that's only because I'm so handsome.
Okay, so you handsome cried.
Yeah,
Exactly.
It was very emotional.
I would definitely say, and I don't actually mind spoiling this bit because it's part of the story, but it's not like an important part of the story. There's a bit where you fight one of the champions of Ul'dah, and he is my favorite character. His name is Raubon. And there's a part where they're doing like a friendly contest, like, they're like, okay, well, let's make sure these people are up to our training standards or whatever, and they're fighting, and you get to fight Raubon, and I was just like, this is my game. Okay, that's it. Like,
I forgot about that scene until right now, and holy crap, that is such a good scene.
It is such a good fight. It's such a good fight, and like Raubon just being like, look at me, I'm a baller, and just like, I love you so much, Raubon.
He's one of the best characters.
Yeah. So reference Raubon as in the lore of the game is one of the attendants to one of the. It's like the attendant to the ruler of Ul'dah.
Yeah,
and
he is an Ul'dan refugee who got his status through fighting in the arena and worked his way up from being a slave to being one of the most powerful people in Ul'dah, serving the Empress.
Arguably one of the strongest base humans of the realm.
Yeah,
and
everyone loves him.
Yeah, he is a very good character who is fairly well written, and the scenes employed with him are very powerful. Especially, you see a lot more of it in Stormblood. To answer the question of favorite scene out of Heavensward, probably the initial revelation of how I'm trying to avoid this without spoilers. Probably.
I'll take my headset off.
I'll take my
No. You don't have to. You don't have to. The initial reveal of what the final big bad was going to be, and then the actual big bad.
Yeah.
That transition from the one to the other is very, very
well done.
Okay, so it's better than the bait and switch that Final Fantasy IX did right at the end?
No.
Yes.
But 14 doesn't have anything like that yet. It builds its villains very well, even when
good.
even when the villain switches from one to another, the other one that it's switching to has been built from before that.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if they do a switch, it's almost always foreshadowed multiple times, so that
Yeah.
anyone with even a awareness of tropes can expect it. But it doesn't make if it happens any less enjoyable, because usually the animation and the cutscene involved with the camera work and the framing of the scene is very well done.
Yeah, it's more like the switch from the villain being the Empire in 6 to Kefka throwing the Emperor off and becoming the new primary villain.
There was a scene I was watching, like a reaction video or a Let's Play or something, and I always laugh when I think about it. The guy's watching this cutscene and he's going, "I know exactly what's going to happen. It's so predictable. Give it to me. I need it."
I will say, I think it's interesting, and if there are any 14 fans listening to this, they're going to be screaming at the screen right now that none of us mentioned Hoshfont as our favorite moment.
Well,
I won't go any
cannot
more.
mention that because there's certain things involved with that prevent us
Yeah.
from mentioning.
So
I'm not
many
going into
spoilers that-
I'm not going into anything on the character. Just it is interesting that his scene is considered one of the stronger ones. Multiple of his scenes, because he is a fan favorite character, and none of us mentioned any of them.
Well, it's because I haven't actually gotten my House for Tom tattoo yet, so I kind of feel like a pretender. So
okay.
Once I get the tattoo put on, that will be my favorite scene, because the thing about Harshaphant as a character, and I'm not going to go into what happens to him, but I think you can, if you're really looking for context clues, you can get it. But basically, Harshaphant as a character starts kind of where you start. He's like not very, he's not very important. He's been sort of pushed off into the coldest part of the goddamn frozen Death North that you're in Heavensward, and it's very subtle, but your fortunes are connected throughout most of Heavensward, and you don't really see it because you don't see like him get like a new office or any of that stuff, but it is very apparent that you and he are together for a lot of that time, like at least in sort of in social status. His social status is improving because he found you, and you are doing all this cool hero stuff, so he becomes more and more important into the story. Now, that to me, and because you get to sit with him through so much of it, you learn his character, you learn who he is, you feel kind of how he feels, then you meet his family, then you sort of understand what's going on there, and like, as it just gets deeper and deeper, you start to really, really build a connection with this dude, and then when the story beat happens, like, you're just like, what? You're just like, you can't, like, ugly crying basically, and you're just like, oh, okay, I'm gonna sob forever now. I remember the moment when I said I was doing what dungeon is that?
The Vault?
The Vault, yeah. And everybody in my FC jumped into chat, and I was like, why? What's going on? Hey, party in the Vault? And everybody was like, no, we're just gonna hang out. Nobody said a fucking word. And I get to the end of the Vault, and the thing, and I'm just like, son of a bitch! And everybody bursts out laughing because they knew it was coming, and it was such like a visceral moment for me that like they were all just like, yep, we just wanted to be here because, yep, we knew it was coming, and
we wanted to see if it hit you emotionally like it hit us.
Kind of, yeah.
That really speaks to the strength of the writing in this game and the characters and the depth they give the characters, because there's a lot of moments like that where someone's played ahead of where you're at and they know something's coming and they're like, ooh, I want to be in voice chat when you get there. I want to hear your reaction.
Similar, you'll see similar things happen at future points of the next expansions, and this is probably most prevalent in Shadowbringers.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But that will occur a little bit. So for Stormblood, to continue on with this, what is your favorite content out of Stormblood for those that have played it? That's the main story of Stormblood, I should say.
Gimlet Dark, just fucking hands down windmill smash, Gimlet Dark, and all of the story payoff that comes from that. I was just like, hell yes, finally. We actually get to fight Garleans. Yes.
I will be. I mean, haven't you fought Garleans enough in the main scenario? Like, main scenario roulette has me fighting Garleans until I get sick of it.
Well, it's more. Well,
I'm joking.
Well, no, because actually it's important. Like, that's actually kind of a good point. The thing is that you feel like you are actually affecting the battle.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
oh, I absolutely get it, and it's awesome going into battle with all the NPCs that we've grown to love.
Exactly.
For me, it's very easy, and I'm gonna be very general about this because it would definitely be spoilers. But the character arc of Fordola is definitely my favorite part.
I feel like Fordola I didn't think I was gonna like at the beginning, but then the payoff at the end just kind of, it all came together in the end, and it really kind of blew me away.
Oh yeah, Fordola. All right.
I cannot wait to see more of Fordola as the series progresses, because we definitely will.
I think for me, my favorite scene from Stormblood's probably near the end, when the fight occurs with your rival of, is the best way I can describe it.
I think you can say the character name. That's not necessarily going to be any more of a spoiler.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. Okay, so it's because I've spoken up, my brain's still not fully functioning, and
okay.
And I can't remember said character's name. And it's just like, I know who the character is, I know what he looks like, I know the voice, I know how much I hate this smarmy little asshole. I can't wait to kill his fucking ass again. And
Wait, Xenos?
I'm pretty sure it's Xenos.
Oh, Xenos is my husband. It's freaking great. My entire FC is like, the fuck is wrong with you? He's a psychopath. He is definitely like the mall, like, you know when you could go to like malls and buy, those shitty katanas for like, $50? He is the guy who went out and bought 3 of them.
He's a suburban samurai.
He's got 10 of them.
And he put them in a golf bag and is wandering around like a shithead. And he's just like, he's that one anime trope that I really like, the like enemy you fight who becomes like in love with the violent, with like the conflict between the two of you. Something that Final Fantasy is actually doing pretty well as well. Final Fantasy VII is doing pretty well as well. The like, I'm in love with you through the violence we inflict on one another, and it's just like, okay, this is crazy, but I might like this guy. Just like you like violence, I like violence too. See also Sadu, who is my waifu, by the way.
Oh, let me get in on that. So that ties in nicely to my favorite part there. The entirety of the whole Asm Step storyline is my favorite part of Stormblood.
It was so good.
It's so good. Just they dive deep on all these characters. You're meeting them for the first time. They all have so much personality. It's the fully fleshed out culture. And this being the first town you visit, nobody there talks. And then it's still good right from the get-go. And just all the payoff from that. And then they come back later on in the story when everything's coming to a head. That's a hell of a moment. Ugh. I hope we get more Sadu. Absolutely.
My waifu must be represented.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually really upset that she wasn't in Gimlet Dark, because that would have been amazing. She just shows up at Gimlet Dark and is just like, die, and everything just explodes. She is the queen of black mages.
I'm really hoping they get more in the next expansion.
Yeah, me too. So, and then, all right. So, Shadowbringers is current content. So we don't mean to be so vague, but it's kind of an exercise in actually wanting you to buy it and actually wanting you to engage. We're trying to keep the major story elements, sort of not things we're talking about directly. So I apologize if it sounds super vague.
Yeah, that's okay. I appreciate that, because the more we're talking, the more my mouse is hovering over the add to cart on the starter edition of.
So to start with Shadowbringers, because that's the most recent content, I feel that a lot of people, a lot of fans in general, there's a particular scene at the end to explain how one of the fights occurs, and I think that scene in general is probably like the most liked scene.
God. It's so good. Sorry, I couldn't contain myself.
No.
I think
away.
it is without spoiling anything. It is the lead up into the final fight of the game. It is for the main story of Shadowbringers. It is the build up, the crescendo of the moment of this of who we're going to fight and who's going to join us, and the explanation for how these people show up randomly, especially given where we are at the point in the story, and their significance to the story as a whole is as a whole. And I mean by story I mean the whole story is very important, and just that build up in the crescendo and the bad guy just being like, really? All right, just like going balls to the wall then. All right, I'll go balls to the wall too. And that's pretty much what the last fight is, just a balls to the wall, like a hint of what could come.
Let eons let
No,
no.
You don't get that. No, that is so spoilery. You cannot even say that.
It's so good.
It ties so much together. Like it's tying in plot that covers 6 years, and it's all there, and it's right in your face, and it's
And like, to me, Shadowbringers as a content update, as an expansion, I think does a lot of good insofar as like it grounds you in a familiar but different world, and so it all sort of feels fresh and new again in some weird ways. They adjusted things like tank aggro and a bunch of other technical stuff to make the game feel slightly different, but the game felt very fresh. The game felt very like invigorating and new, and what's this new ability I have? Holy crap, which I didn't really feel throughout the entirety of, say, Stormblood or the entirety of, say, Heavensward. I didn't feel like, oh, I have this new ability. It was just like, oh, there's a new thing on my bar. Okay.
Yeah, like, it is. Yeah, and part of too is also that we're starting to hit the points in terms of like MMO balancing where like Shadowbringers content can go from 70 to 80, and you're starting to hit the levels that like a lot of MMOs have issues with trying to balance out the power level per se of abilities. And after a certain point, Final Fantasy just goes like, yeah, no, you can do this. It's super cool, amazing fucking thing, and you can do it like every. I think the longest cooldown I think is like 3 minutes, but it makes sense when you are doing some of these moves that you're like, oh, I'm doing things that like bosses used against me in Realm Reborn, and you're like, what?
I mean, frickin' Summoner. Okay, so the first major raid of the game is fighting Bahamut, and now I get to have my personal Bahamut over my shoulder.
Yep.
Just shooting shit at the enemies.
Yeah. And it has already sort of been implied with some of the classes that the future updates and future, because the odds are the future expansions will allow you to even like modify certain things. Like there's a non-zero chance that we get quite literally like alternate versions of Bahamut for the Summoner at the next expansion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, I mean, at current, my thought process on the subject of like all of the quality of life changes that have been put into place by Shadowbringers is what I think has elevated Shadowbringers to a game that, while I'm not going to call anything the WoW killer because that's not really a thing, has made it so that a lot of WoW players have jumped ship and come to Final Fantasy XIV because there, in some ways, it's similar enough to WoW that it doesn't feel like completely alien, but it's different enough that people are staying for the story, staying for the engagement, staying for, the different characters and how their stories progress and, what's going on with them. It's damned interesting. And like,
well, it's worth mentioning too that Blizzard, with some of its most recent expansions, haven't really hit the nail on the head with a lot of them, and then their handling of the content between each major expansion has been lackluster, to say the least.
Yeah.
And Square has taken this opportunity because of the devotion and faith to its fans for this MMO, that the work they have done on it, which for all the work ethos of 1.0 and the work ethos they did to make 2.0 and onward, they have made like a social contract between us as the fans and them as the company and provider, that we know we've messed up with 1.0 release, and we cannot get that faith back entirely, but we're going to try our damnedest to at least like redeem ourselves in the eyes of the community as a whole, and we're going to maintain a very high quality output of content. Like arguably the weakest expansion of the ones that have come out so far is Stormblood, and that's still like at least a 7 out of 10, I would say.
I'd go higher than that. I would say A Realm Reborn is the only one I would give a 7 out of 10 for, and that it goes well above 7 out of 10 several times. It's just, it is plotting, and I'm hoping that is dealt with in what they're dealing with.
Yeah, that's why I specified it to expansion specifically, because I would agree with you that Realm Reborn is the weakest part of the content. But if they're going to update the quality of the content and the story provided in A Realm Reborn to what we've seen in the expansions, then I have to go based on what I've enjoyed and remember the most.
I mean, what we said earlier, and we'll see what your thoughts are, Ron, is that Stormblood out of the expansions has the best new characters. Heaven's Ward has the best plot, and then Shadowbringers is kind of the best of both. Because you have to admit, Stormblood is a character-driven narrative, not a plot-driven narrative.
I will agree that it's character-driven more than plot-driven. My counterpoint is, based on the culmination of what has happened in Shadowbringers' main story, I feel like that is probably the most plot important one to date.
I would say everything in Heaven's Ward was plot driven entirely. Even the character stuff is plot driven. Shadowbringers, as I said, does the best of both, but Shadowbringers definitely has a lot of character moments and plot moments. I mean, just think of all the stuff with the previous Warriors of Darkness, all the stuff with Fiul, sorry.
Yeah, no, I
Like-
know what you mean. Yeah,
The building of the Crystal Exarch, like there's just as much character as plot in Shadowbringers. That's why I said I think it's a good balance of the two.
yeah. I think it's also worth noting that I think, based on all the MMOs that are out there, I don't think it's any contest that Shadowbringers is the best story out of any MMO to date.
I
Hands
have
down.
a feeling. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I said it was hands down. I agree.
I'm pretty sure that Shadowbringers' success was one of the reasons why we suddenly got a Shadowlands MMO out of WoW. I'm pretty sure.
Here's the thing. I don't know if that's entirely true because they had to have had Shadowlands in development before Shadowbringers ever came out. Like, so they couldn't have just based it off of that. They might have changed their title, but even if they did, like, it still works for it. I think that's more just a convergent thought.
And that's fair too.
And they could have changed some of the design philosophy because of the release of Shadowbringers. Like they had originally planned for this section of the of this content that's in WoW to only be X amount of time in these Shadowlands, but then after seeing the success of Shadowbringers, they said, "Oh, we should just modify."
They could.
They could tweak it a little bit.
Yeah, they absolutely could have tweaked it. I'm just going. They could not have done it wholesale from seeing the success of Shadowbringers. Like, it had to have been in development before Shadowbringers even released, and they saw the success.
True.
But yeah, they definitely learned from it, just like Final Fantasy XIV learned from WoW, because 1.0 to 2.0, you can see huge amounts of WoW that they kind of took and transplanted, at least in the way the systems worked, if not the way they do the story. But how about Shadowbringer mode?
Yeah. So any other like non-culmination of 6 years of plot moments from Shadowbringer?
Because I was gonna say, like, yeah, one that I think everybody can agree on.
And what one's that?
The fight, the end title card fight, and like how that feels and who you're going against.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not only from a technical perspective does it feel amazing, because you're like, all right, you know, we're about to go into a raid with this against this monster, right? Okay, cool. You know, what are we raiding as? You know, what's the point of this dungeon? The point of this dungeon is to go in and beat the monster. Okay. But from a story perspective, literally, like, I would say at least 90% of my FC ugly cried at the end of this fucking raid. Like, sobbing.
14 knows how to tug at the heartstrings, and it doesn't have to do what other things do by murdering all of the good characters to make you feel.
Oh, so
it can make you... Yeah, sorry.
It doesn't pull a George R. Martin on you?
No, it doesn't have to kill all the people off and stab them just to make you feel. No, it knows how to make you feel just by how it tells the story.
Yeah, and there are certain dialogue prompts that you can get throughout the game, and one of the dialogue prompts at the end of the Shadowbringers definitely lets you like choose a heartstring pulling moment for yourself.
Yup.
Oh my fucking god. Yeah, I know exactly.
And the worst part is not many people are going to get said dialogue option, because you have to do what is now an optional dungeon and complete that optional dungeon to its entirety before you can have that dialogue option.
That's something to tell Brian about. So in 14, you get throughout the game they give you choices of what your character says, just like in any game where you can choose between options. But here's the thing: some of those options only appear if you've done certain things in the game. So if one of the optional dungeons is with a character that you're going to deal with later, stuff you dealt with that in that dungeon might now pop up as dialogue choices for you to say as a reference.
Yeah, it's like, oh, hey, so as an example, like maybe you do a dungeon and there's an NPC that like follows along with you, and afterwards, if you go talking to that NPC, though, they may mention like, oh man, remember when we were in that dungeon and like you did this cool shit and then I did this amazing thing, we saved both our asses? Wasn't that a good time?
Here's an example. Here's a great example. So, in Heaven's Ward, there is a major NPC named S10E. He is Dragoon. He is a major character throughout the course of that expansion. But you can meet him earlier if you're a Dragoon. You meet him in your level 50 quest line in A Realm Reborn before Heaven's Sword, and if you do that quest line, he has entirely different dialogue when you run into him in Heaven's Sword, because you already know each other, and he trusts you. As opposed to if you don't do that quest line, and he is very wary of you when you first meet him.
That's a nice level of programming there to be able to discern that.
Well,
Absolutely, and there's several moments like that where, because people, this is one thing I also appreciate. People you meet in job quests and regular quests in the world can be story people later in the game, and what you did with them before reflects their dialogue after.
If I can jump in here.
Yeah.
The Binding Coil, like calling it that probably won't spoil anything for anybody. I never finished it. I got like halfway through and then I took a break from the game. The NPC that you go in there with acknowledges that we started it but didn't finish it. So even if you're only halfway through it.
Yeah, and if you do finish it, she has completely different dialogue. And if you don't start it at all, she has completely different dialogue. So they wrote 3 entirely different dialogue trees for that character based on whether you did this or not. And that dialogue choices go on, like, she still makes a reference to that in Shadowbringers. So, like, these aren't, like, little things either. Like, 14 respects the history of its game. It expects... Now, it's okay if you don't remember some of this stuff, but if you're an entrenched player, it's going to drop references to A Realm Reborn for stuff you did maybe years ago at this point, but it's still relevant to the characters as it should be, and it still makes sense. Like, for them, it's only a couple months ago.
That's some good programming.
Yeah, it's good programming and good writing.
It's also recognizing that there are continuity differences between the fans and the players, and while there are small story beats, there are things that are still worth recognizing to not have it be to show that the story that you are going through, while similar to other people's, will have small moments that will be different and unique to yourself.
Speaking of well done story, I will say my favorite moment from Shadowbringers is the 5 optional quests, the role quests, giving you the backstory for the Warriors of Darkness, getting to see who they were and what led them to where they are in the story. Like, it's basically following your character but for a different place, and just seeing their rise and fall, and it's such a beautiful story. It's so well told, and I love how it ends in the final one.
Yeah, like the really interesting thing about Shadowbringers as an expansion is its juxtaposition of light and darkness as positive versus negative states, which a lot of games try to do but badly. And the juxtaposition for me is actually one of the things that's really, really good. Like, everybody's like, damn the light and things like that. That's a swear, is like, damn the light, is because the light is everywhere. All of these things that we have been programmed by like pop culture to associate as good, up to and including like winged angels and all sorts of stuff, are evil things trying to murder you in this game. So it's super duper important to like. I mean, it's not a spoiler in this particular case because if you watch the trailer, you see it. But like, yeah, you can see how like light and darkness have switched as good and evil concepts, and that to me is extremely
nice. I'm liking this. Go on, Andrew.
I was just going to speak to the moment, not the ultimate conclusion of the expansion, but I guess you'd say the climax before that. There's he seems like a big bad, and he is a big bad, but he's not the big bad, and just he thinks he's the good guy for the whole thing. This
shithead.
Yeah,
this shithead. I know you're talking about.
He is clearly a shithead. He is just such a shitty shithead. And even all the way to the very end, he thinks he's the good guy. And you can see why he thinks he's the good guy. You can see how he got to be there and how it all happened. And it's just, you almost feel bad for him, but he's just such a shithead.
Well, like I said, I mean, this is what made people literally ugly cry by the end of the expansion, is because they did such a good job building him up that like, yeah, you felt for him. And you shouldn't feel for the villain, but you did. You felt for him, and you were like, well, I mean, this guy's an absolute dick who needs to definitely die, but wow, like, he's got a soul, and he's not like snidely fucking Whiplash version of Sylvanas over here, being like, meh, I shall do evil, just do evil. It's like, can we not? I have many opinions on how this game and WoW's story interact in sort of like a pop culture sense, so yeah, my apologies.
Nah, that's okay. Considering...
Go
on.
I was just going to say, I kind of like hearing the comparison, because I haven't played WoW in years and years, so I don't really know the state of it now, or what the story was really like now.
Well, to give you the shortest possible version, because I think we're going on 3 hours now.
Getting close.
Yeah. Sylvanas is evil now, but like more evil than before. Now Sylvanas is at, I'm gonna do a genocide, and it makes sense because I guess Sylvanas is supposed to be evil, but the Horde was always written as sort of morally sort of balanced between like, okay, the Forsaken are kind of evil, but like the Tauren and all them are kind of like good and chill and like nature, you know, they just want to smoke weed and like hang out in the sunlight. But so they're written very in BFA, they're written very like mustache twirlingly evil. And that is frustrating to me as a player who actually likes the Horde. Because the Horde is not evil. The Horde has legitimate, frustrating complaints with the Alliance, and the Alliance has occasionally not listened. And so, yeah, they're at war because the Alliance ignores the Horde.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. And this
From
is the,
that perspective.
And this is the thing. The Forsaken have never, like, the Forsaken are part of the Horde because World of Warcraft didn't want to have 3 factions.
Yep.
The Forsaken are basically just part of the Horde because they wanted them to be playable. This is absolutely within the character of not just Sylvanas, but the Forsaken in general. If you look at Warcraft 3, like, it is entirely, like, the question is, the question isn't why did the Horde do this? The question is, why are the Forsaken part of the Horde? Because this is entirely normal and within their character. So why would the Taurens and Orcs even associate with them? That's the question.
Yeah. And like to make sure we bring it back to Final Fantasy, the reason why that's frustrating to me as someone who played a lot of BFA, like I got all the way to rating in BFA before I made the jump, is because I felt like at that time Sylvanas was basically being written as, like I said, like snidely Whiplash evil, like wacky races levels of, man, I'm gonna push this banana, this cart of bananas in front of their car. Like, it was stupid how evil she was.
Oh god, that's no a reason. Reference.
I know, right?
Wacky races. Wow.
Shut up, I'm old.
No. I got the reference. That was a deep cut there.
Yeah, but like, and so it makes no sense to me that a character would be that evil, but then when you compare it to, the Ascian person that we're fighting in Shadowbringers, you understand. You see where they're coming from.
So what you're saying is basically there's better writing in Final Fantasy than there is in World of Warcraft.
I mean,
modern day.
The duh is implied in that statement, but yes.
I mean, here I'll say with all of the villains in 14 have been, now they are not all people you like. They are villains, and they are written to be villains. But all of them, you can either understand where they're coming from, or at least see how they got to where they are.
I can see how you got here. I can see how you got here, or I can understand your point of view. But you're wrong, so I must fight you.
Yeah, there's only one character who I would argue is a black and white villain, and that is because he is literally set up to be a mirror of you, where you are basically inherently good, and this person is your polar opposite and is meant to be that as your rival, as your villainous counterpart. And they're the only one I would argue doesn't really have that development there, but the development he gets is upfront development. He's getting development for who he is now, not who he was before.
And I want to give him all the kisses, because he's my husband.
I'm not going to talk about your... I'm not going to talk about your taste, but
like
I was going to say, yeah, I was going to say, from a looks perspective, okay, maybe I can see it, but from a personality perspective, he has some problems there. Boy.
He is a very he is a very polarizing character. He is my least favorite villain of Final Fantasy XIV, but I know a lot of people love him dearly. I just think that the rival character has been done to death, and there's not a lot of complexity there for me. But I know that that character who's very direct, who is meant to parallel you, who's meant to show what you could have become, that is a very popular character for a reason.
Yeah.
It's just not for me. Vegeta.
I would argue he starts off as Vegeta and is probably going to end up as Frieza.
Yeah, I know. We'll see where things go. But I just meant we've seen that character 20 years ago.
Yeah. All right, so according to chat log and Brian's incessant pointing it out, we should probably begin winding the episode down.
Oh yeah, I'm gun shy now. I'm not never that 6.5 hour Resident Evil 4 episode. That was enough.
No mas.
So
hopefully we only go 4 hours on Final Fantasy VII Remake. Hopefully.
Oh,
I have a question for each of you guys leading into winding it down. Quick question. Who is your favorite of the Scion?
Ooh,
For Brian, there is a group of character called the Scions of the Seventh Dawn they are basically your party of NPCs. They follow you throughout the game. Different ones aid you through different things. You pretty much always have at least one of these like 8 characters joining you on all the main scenario stuff.
Okay.
Tataru is clearly the best. Fight me.
Well, she's the best at playing capitalism.
Well, Windmill Slam, yeah, Tataru is, yeah. I mean, okay, so let's say active scions versus... Because Tataru's not really a scion, right? She's kind of a scion, but...
She is legitimately a scion.
She is the logistics of the scions.
Yeah, she's like their logistical backbone.
Yeah.
But she is the best.
That's like saying...
logistical backbone.
That's like saying Minfilia isn't a scion because she sets up the stuff, but she doesn't go on the adventures.
Okay, I guess that's fair. Damn. So yeah, I mean, if we're including that, yeah, I'd have to say Tataru, because Tataru is by far the one who's just like, oh my god, I am actually extremely competent at everything I do. Except being a summoner. She's bad.
The little Lalafell secretary that ends up being able to do everything.
But anything that doesn't involve combat, let's be fair here. She's clearly not a fighter, but she knows what she excels at, and she isn't afraid to use said skills.
Well, when she summons a carbuncle, it runs away from her. There's some kind of skill in that.
It was amazing.
I would probably go with... Probably Alphinaud.
Alphino, yeah.
I would definitely say he's had some of the most deep and interesting character development.
He probably has the most development out of everyone, including your character in this frickin' game.
Yeah. I would also say, like, okay, assuming Tataru, for whatever reason, was off the board, Alisaie. Alisaie is, like, my freaking Patronus. Like, she's just red mage all day, fuck you up, swords to the face, she don't give a damn. Mess with her and you will die. Amazing.
Yeah, I can't hide it. Alisaie is my waifu, so yes, it would be Alisaie 100% without a doubt. I love that girl, and I am so excited that I can use her in parties now.
Yep. Oh, that's another thing we didn't really talk about. Is in the Shadowbringers dungeons, you can actually bring in NPCs and do this thing called trusts. And the NPCs will like fight with you in the dungeon, and you can just go in alone.
So you don't need other players.
Yeah, you don't actually need other players if you don't feel like dealing with people that day.
And
for most of the dungeons anyway. I think you still need it for a couple of the 8-man. I think you still need players for the 8-man.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about the 4-man zone.
Yeah, you can only do it. You can only do it in dungeon. So just the 4-man stuff. And it's being rolled out slowly into the older content. Eventually, all of the story dungeons from A Realm Reborn on will have trust available, but they're going to be doing that very slowly. We're just going to get a couple dungeons every couple patches that get added to it. But it'll always only be main story requirements. Any optional dungeons still require players because they do not want NPCs to replace playing with other players entirely. Because, people like me would absolutely do that because I am an antisocial person who plays MMOs. Go figure.
Know that feel.
All right. Well, I think you guys have convinced me. I think I'm going to eventually become one of you. I will wait till the summer release, but I think that you've definitely proven that this is going to be a game that consumes my life. So
yeah, I would say definitely set aside some time.
So job well done, everybody.
Yeah. More money for Daddy Yoshi P.
I definitely set aside some time for this if you can, whether it's a decent chunk or like 2 or 3 hours at a time. Because once you start, you may find you can't stop and you have to force yourself to stop.
I'd be like, what is this food that my wife is presenting me with?
But it was morning 12 hours ago.
Yeah.
Oh, I've done that, where it's like I start a game and then suddenly the sun is coming up and I'm like,
Yeah,
wait a minute,
Brian.
didn't I
Brian,
just turn this game on like an hour ago?
Brian, guess what game that's had to happen for me?
Factorio.
No. It begins with an F, though.
Factorio is an excellent game, though.
I know it is. I'm just... It's not...
I know. I was trolling, but Factorio is that game for me. That is the first game since I was a kid where I went, oh, it's 5 a.m. and I have to work tomorrow? Whoops.
So, I really do think, Brian, you will probably enjoy it, and I'm sure all of us here will be lovingly and willing to help you out with it as best we can, based on how server data transferring works.
That's a great question. What server is everybody on?
Shan actually asked in the chat for everyone's.
That was before I joined.
No, that was.
No, this is like 20 minutes ago.
I'm looking at chat. I've had chat pulled up the whole time.
General, not
in the general.
Okay, that's why I'm in DLC podcast chat.
Gotcha. I probably should have put it there now that I think about it, but
whatever. No, he posted it in the general. So, that's where I've been posting also the time check as well. But anyway.
Well, I haven't seen that either. No wonder I was confused when people went, Brian is poking us, and I'm like, he hasn't said anything about the time.
Yeah, I've been posting on the general, but whatever. So
I don't know where the main data center is or what the name of it is. I think it's Aether or Crystal. It's one of the two, but I'm on Adamantoise.
You're on Adamantoise? I believe you're on Aether with me. I'm on Midgard and Stormer.
Yeah. And I think Andrew and I are on Crystal.
Yeah.
Because you said you were on what do you call it? Yeah, you're on Diablo.
Yeah, you guys are Crystal, and then it sounds like me and Ron are on Aether.
So what? If you're on different servers, you can't play with each other? Is that how it works?
Okay, so here's the thing. There are things. You have server clusters and servers. Servers can play with each other by you go to an Aether crystal and you can switch over. So like I could play with Ron without any issue. I could just literally switch over to his thing. We could go questing even though we're on different servers. There are server clusters. There are only 2 in America, Aether and Crystal. You cannot do anything across server clusters.
It's divided basically between like East Coast, West Coast, EU, Asia.
Yeah.
Basically.
So like me and Ron could play together without an issue. You two could play together without an issue, but we couldn't play together because we're on different server clusters.
Wasn't there 3?
But it's still better than it used to be where you couldn't do anything across server.
Yeah, there are 3.
Is the server randomly assigned, or did you choose it?
You choose it.
Assuming it's not full. If it's not full, you can choose it. When Shadowbringers came out, there was a very slight issue, and by slight I mean massive, where some servers filled up quite literally within seconds of being opened.
Because when Shadowbringers came out, and the previous WoW expansion was a dumpster fire, we had a lot of WoW refugees joining 14 all at once, and the servers were literally doubling in size.
Yeah, and to be fair, Shadowbringers had probably the smoothest launch out of any MMO I've seen for an expansion. They had only one.
Nobody had to fight Raubon EX. What?
Yeah, no one had to fight Raubon EX. They only had one 30-minute downtime due to DDoS, and that was it.
Okay, I will say one more thing, and then we can finish winding down. But I don't think you're gonna have to worry too much, Brian, because they recently added in the being able to switch servers, and they've said that they are working on being able to do that across server cluster as well. It's just not as easy because of how their servers are designed, but it is on their list to make it so players from anywhere can play with each other. It's just a matter of when they get to being able to do it.
Also, keeping in mind too, it is both a physics-related problem as much as it is a server-related problem with terms of how the servers are constructed, because transmitting data halfway across the continent at near instant light speed, or a near instant speed of light, is still going to have a very small amount of delay, and they try to have it be.
Well, yeah, but I could create a character on, like, I know people who play on the European servers because because of their work schedule time-wise, they have more people to play with on there. So, like, the ping is going to suck, but people are literally doing it right now because there's nothing that stops you.
Yeah.
Like, I could play in the Japanese server right now if I wanted.
Yeah, I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying that ping is a thing that is always going to be a factor if you're going to play on a different data cluster. This is a physical, like, that is a physical limit, not necessarily a server design limit.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right. Brian's gonna stab us if we don't stop now. So let's bring it in.
It's all because I'm here. If I wasn't here, he wouldn't be worried about it going 6.5 hours.
Fair. But yeah,
No
I would
comment.
definitely say, I would definitely hard recommend Final Fantasy to all of my friends. I have before, and everybody who pops in. I have a FC that has been like super welcoming and super nice. I highly recommend it as a game.
Yeah, I'm. The only question that for me now is to decide whether to buy it on Steam or just buy it directly from the Square Enix store.
I
would
absolutely.
say buy it on Steam.
Sorry, I was going to say I absolutely 100% without a doubt recommend buying it from the Square Enix store. I regret buying it on Steam hard.
Really?
What's the difference?
The difference is if my wife wants to play something on Steam, she can't because of it.
Okay.
Right.
It became it's more actually an issue because I've shared my library with my father-in-law, and me playing the thing has locked him out of doing a lot of things. So yeah, I highly recommend getting the standalone version. Notice this wasn't an issue for years of playing, so it might not be an issue you deal with now, but for an MMO, I will always recommend getting the standalone if possible, just because of something like that.
Oh, right now on the Square Enix store, the entire package with all the expansions is $36.
There you go.
So
I believe Square's taking advantage of the. I don't say taking advantage, but they do see that there is an opportunity with so many people being home
yeah, it's called
that they
taking
could get in
advantage.
people. Yeah.
It's called taking advantage. Let's just call it what it is.
It's being smart business people.
Yes.
Opportunities
Yes, but I
for
think they are taking advantage of it and being like, hey, we know things suck right now. If you want a brief escape, by brief I mean 120 hours,
Or 3,000.
yeah, or 3,000, somewhere between there. We have this great MMO for you to try out.
So that might be a payday purchase, and I'll just maybe wait until either start it or wait for the update. I have no idea. But y'all have convinced me. I think I'll give this a try, at the very least, and see how I like it. So, thank you, gentlemen, for twisting my arm.
More than happy.
So, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, anything that we didn't mention about Final Fantasy XIV that you want to tell us, you can let us know on our Facebook, downloadable content, or on Twitter at DL Content, or using the feedback button on our website, dlcpodcast.com. You can also catch every single episode on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, as well as the website. So that was a very, very in-depth and largely spoiler-free a spoiler-free discussion of Final Fantasy XIV, so thank you very much for being on. So all it remains for me to do is to thank Ron, Ronny, Joshi, Shan, and Andrew for being on this episode. And on that fun note, I am Brian. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.